Hey y'all, a quick note before we dive into this episode. Gavin and I recorded this before the news came out about Ripple winning their court case. I have to say, I am elated over this news. This is incredible for Coinbase. This is incredible for the United States. It is incredible for anybody in the US who cares about crypto and the future of crypto in the United States. Now, there'll be a lot more analysis done over the coming few days, and I don't want to overstate anything before all of that has come out. But I think the biggest thing for me is playing out what the reverse of this would have meant. It's not just a big deal because it was a win. It's a big deal because it wasn't a loss, in my view. The big takeaway I have from this, having looked over a little bit of the ruling by the judge, is she understood the nuance here, which is incredible. Like, there's clearly an understanding of decentralization, of the fact that you have buyers buying from a lot of different sellers. Like her main conclusion was these aren't securities. They don't pass the Howey test because folks are not buying with the expectation of profit due to Ripple's efforts. And that's the whole key piece, like that there's some centralized entity that you're investing in and that because of their efforts, you're going to make a profit off of it. The judge seemed to understand that there's a lot of different factors that are maybe driving this up and down. You're not buying from one central entity. You're buying from any number of different sellers. So specifically, it was that XRP, when being sold on these exchanges by many different people and with lots of buyers and sellers, is not a security. There was a slight win for the SEC in that she did rule that Ripple had violated securities laws when issuing these tokens to a select set of investors. My assumption there, or I believe it's like early on investors who were making an investment more in Ripple who got tokens as part of that exchange. There's something there. But in any case, I actually think identifying that nuance and the fact that the judge identified that nuance is also fantastic. Again, I'm not opposed to there being some level of regulation or some level of things being securities in this space. But obviously, these tokens that are trading on these big exchanges that are decentralized at this point cannot abide by current securities laws. So anyway, huge win for the space. Pour out a drink, everyone. This is a big seminal moment. It's a precedent-setting case, and I hopefully it bodes quite well for Coinbase. All right, on to the episode. Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for your Friday recap. And we got a simple episode for you today. Just two simple folk.
Just
Gavin and myself.
Simpletons. You mean the word simpletons is what you're thinking of.
Simple gens. Simple D-gens.
Oh, fair enough.
There's something
Simple
clever there.
Oh, that's a new
Simple
project
gen.
we could launch. Simple Gen.
Oh my God, you need to. Gavin's bags are down, and it shows because he's constantly brainstorming ways to grift the audience on this show.
I want to say very clearly, I love coming up with ideas, but I will not put them into play unless I make a thing of it.
You're
so
serious.
just to be clear, yes, exactly.
Yes, of course. Good disclaimer. All right. Anyway, it's your Friday recap episode. I've already said that. I have a couple of administrative notes. That's a lie. I've got one administrative note before we dive into today's episode, which is that we have rescheduled our Los Angeles Overpriced Happy Hour. Thanks everyone so much for your flexibility on that. It will be on Tuesday, July 25th at Danvers Gallery in Culver City. So same location, 6 p.m., same time, different date, July 25th. And our guests are going to be the Cool Cats team. So we have Steven Teglas, who is the CEO of Cool Cats, and Klon, the artist behind Cool Cats. Klon was on the podcast many, many moons ago, like 2021 days. And I'm really excited for this conversation. It's one I've been wanting to have for a while, is to really take a look back at what happened in their own words, and then where they are now, where they want to go from here. So
I was gonna say,
convo.
I have a lot of admiration for Klon and what he's gone through. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of he does this term learnings, but he's had a lot of learnings, right? Like, there's been a lot of idea of like what you do with an IP that was really strong, and I think still can be. The holders have had different experiences, but the art has always been really good PFPs, yes. And I think that they have an opportunity still to kind of take it to something interesting.
Everything that Luca talks about in terms of why he bought and loved Pudgy Penguins applies to Cool Cats. And they're one of the other few projects who really has that core, family-friendly, lovable, you could take them anywhere, to any country, to any state, to any whatever, and see them succeed. So we'll talk about all that. It'll be a lot of fun. Cool Cats holders, you are now welcome to go start reserving your seats at the event. You can go to opjtour.com to do that. We're still keeping it open for Deadfellas holders, obviously OPJ NFT holders. Everyone go reserve. All right. And with that, we need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors, including OpenSea and Web3 Cents, who are sponsoring the tour. We also have Nouns Builders is sponsoring this upcoming spot on the tour, so I always want to shout them out. But go hear this word from our sponsors who make this show possible. Y'all know the phrase, not your keys, not your crypto. Well, in a world where too many people have had to learn that the hard way, Overpriced JPEGs is proud to partner with Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. Ledger's Nano S Plus and Nano X hardware wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, Ledger's own software for setting up your Nano device and managing your crypto assets, is the easiest way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control of your digital assets. You can use all your favorite dApps with Ledger Live, accessing 15 plus Web3 apps, including 1inch, Paraswap, Lido, and Zerion. So you can not only manage, but also grow your portfolio. And Ledger Live is available on mobile and desktop. Securing digital assets shouldn't be complicated. Ledger is as easy as it gets. Uncompromising security, effortless connectivity, full transparency, Ledger is your one-stop shop to trade and track crypto, grow your assets, and manage NFTs. Secure your future with Ledger. Visit shop.ledger.com today or check out the link in the show notes. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OpenSea, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. All right, we're here. Vibes, Gavin. I texted you before the show and was just like, there's no news. Like, nothing's happening. We're going to talk about Fatzuki for the next hour.
Yeah.
This show is going to be interesting because we have
Don't worry.
Don't worry, guys. But I was like, it's kind of lame.
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting period where it's almost, I don't want to call the thing we talked about last week a dead cat bounce, because I don't think it was, but like there was this really harsh moment when the Azuki Elementals reveal happened and everybody just kind of felt like the breath kind of went out of the NFT space, right? Because I think we talked about how this was one of the projects we all thought was doing it right. They did it wrong. And there's this huge thing. I think last week there was a feeling of, oh, okay, great. There's this kind of energy that the community is kind of rallying and the team is there. And honestly, like it still is, I'm not going to, there's still people there, but I think we've kind of like hit that kind of malaise space a little bit again, where it's not like we're not in the throes of everything's totally screwed forever, but we're also definitely like, oh yeah, this is still kind of the mire of what we've been sitting in for a while. And I think that, you pointed out Fatzuki, which is hilarious. Like Fatzuki, a traditional, degen like derivative mint came out, and Fatzuki, as you can expect, Fat Azukis, did well pre-reveal. And then when it revealed, I think when I say did well, I mean it was a 10,000 collection that got to like, I think 0.08, which is pretty impressive for a full derivative project. And then it revealed and everybody saw it and went down to 0.01, 0.02. And like this is the classic play of everybody rush into something, speculation, and then a lot of people get stuck holding bags of overweight Azukis,
At least with Fatzukis, it feels to me like everyone knows what the game they're playing at. You know it's a gambling play. You know you're degenning. You know you're just trying to time something, right? You're just trying to get in before the Ponzi burst, and there's no questions about that. I mean, the funny thing is, I feel like there were people being like, everyone thought like Ether was going to be the Azuki killer, and it turns out Fatzuki was the Ether killer or something.
I mean, we should talk about Ether. So that's
what I was going to say. Let's segue it to that, which because Ether's an example to me of not what I just described, where it's not people buying in expecting a Ponzi dynamic where they know it's just a derivative thing where you're trying to time the pop.
No,
this was more a project presenting as a a project.
And Ether's been a project that's been around, at least in the idea of it and the founders of it, for a very long time. And they've teased art for a very long time. And when I say very long time, I mean going back almost, I think, a full year. Like, we're talking about this, talk around this came out. I remember for DeGods out there, there's a community called Momentum, which was started by Sneaky Ninja Pants. And then I think now is run by other people. But one of the big things when Momentum minted, which was like an alpha pass thing, was you got a Ether whitelist. And this was forever ago, right? Like, and you got an Ether whitelist, and it was a very expensive mint, and then it ended up being something where like that was part of the selling point. So Ether has been a project that's been like in the works forever. So again, we're talking about, okay, so two things that happened with Ether. One, originally it was going to mint for a very expensive price. I think it was a 1 ETH mint. They dropped the price down, I think, to a point. I think it was around 0.35 for people that held the whitelist and 0.65 that had public.
Well, I think it was if you had the whitelist and you could do like a lockup thing. Like, you got the cheaper price if you were willing to lock it up for 10 weeks. And then you had to mint at a more expensive price if you weren't going to lock it up for the 10 weeks.
So, which is kind of
clever.
I mean, it's interesting. At least it's trying something. I will say, like, there hasn't been like a new project, a new PFP only project that's dropped this kind of expensive mint for a very long time. Like, we haven't seen this for a while, other than like, projects that are established already, like Elementals. And they did not mint very fast. Like, Ether came out and it was a really slow mint, which I think everybody kind of expected. And, the art revealed, and some people are really interested in it. A lot of people have pointed out stuff that's wrong with it. It's another anime PFP, which, I think when I first saw this art, I was like, oh, that's at least different. And over time, it's just like, it's like this project, it's one of those projects where I think they ended up taking in $1 million plus on what they minted.
Yeah, and they were trying to raise $10 million, which is just like, in this market, you're trying to raise $10 million. And also, like, they're an anonymous team. Like, there's so much about this that just bugs me, honestly, like, to my core, where I'm like, I don't. But anyway, they raised $1 million, which is nothing to sneeze at.
It's nothing to sneeze at, but also, like, what does this mean from here on out, right? How does a team like this, who's been working on ostensibly on something for a year and a half, work? And I know the guy, I mean, I don't know him, but like, I think VII is the founder of Ether, one of the founders. And like, another time where the person's not a great communicator, like, you see a lot of like him saying things, Discord screenshots. It's like, okay, we've run this project, we've run this back, we've done this. Let's think of other people and other things that we can do. Like, let's try different pathways. And I think this goes, again, back to a little bit of the NFTs. NFTs are right now not seen as the game's way to do something. And what I want to just clear that up is just what I mean is that, like, if I'm an interesting entrepreneur, maybe I'm 17 and I'm like a really incredible high school student, or I'm in my late 20s, or I'm, in my 40s. Nobody right now is saying NFTs are the thing I've got to do. And that's, I think, a problem that we're going to have until the attention, the eye of Sauron comes back on us in some form or another.
Well, this gets us to what we were going to maybe talk to at the end of this section, but we can bring it in here now, which is, we can week over week sit here and be like, energy's a little bit back, like, energy's down. Like, we're in a bear market. Right? Like, that is what we were in. And there is going to be a much bigger kind of structural change for that to change. Right? Yeah. And I think maybe it's, crypto actually seems like it's in a positive place. Like, I'm feeling very, like, tingly over crypto. I think all of the headwinds it's faced in this past year, who knows? It could go on for another 6 months. But, like, it feels like we have this change happening there. All the things we've been covering around the BlackRock ETFs, like, just institutionally, investors seem to be pushing. There seems to be this pushback against the SEC. Even I mentioned this last week that you've got this like Grayscale Bitcoin, that the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust is trying to become a proper ETF, and they're actually fighting the SEC about it in court. I had referenced that last week, that the courts seem to be siding with them, but I didn't realize it was actually in court. I thought it was just like lawyers saying that, but no, this is something that's in court. So this is all to say, like, I feel like you've got these big institutions pushing against the SEC narrative. And you've got the halving coming up in April of next year. Like, I feel good about crypto. And if crypto really hit a bull run again, I think the flow of funds goes first to crypto, and then over time it starts coming back into NFTs. Now, again, it could be another year before that happens, but I think we're really not going to have anything resembling
a
a bull
run.
market,
Yeah,
you know,
in
until
NFTs.
then. So in the meantime, it's going to be, you know, 10,000 of us that sit here talking about our weird little fucking pictures and the weird trades and doing
Yeah.
gambly little weirdness. And I don't know, that's sort of where we're at.
I want to shout out my friend Poof, who wrote this incredible. He's writing these very long threads. Poof is one of the co-founders of EtherOrcs and has done a bunch of other stuff. I'll see if I don't know. It's a thread you can find. He's done like 2 of them now, but they're very long. He does like hours and hours of research on like the wallets that are in the space and all these things, and he has done some deep dives on like what sort of like how much money exists in the NFT space, what kind of like percentage of wallets are doing it. And, you know, it's, as we know, clearly, it's a very small number of people that are trading at a very high level, and they make up the vast majority of the volume. But one of the things that he pointed out, and I'm sure Poof will laugh about this because I think Poof's point about this is not a positive thing, but he does say there are a number of wallets that like basically hibernate. They go into hibernation, right? And they have big things, and that at any time, those wallets conceivably can come back online. And people are, when I'm back online, meaning active again, right? So I think there is a world where if crypto comes back and if there is some sort of thing that flows into NFTs, that could be possible. I actually have a question for you with your politics background. Something I'm really curious about right now is the idea of, when you mentioned how the SEC seems to be getting some pushback, as we enter into a presidential season, let's call it, or a presidential election season, my theory in some ways is that like this is like not a great, like the idea of the kind of Elizabeth Warren, like, you know, kill crypto, it's not good for anybody. It doesn't feel like that's a great talking point necessarily for the Biden side. And I'm more curious. I mean, obviously it speaks to the far left. I think there's an argument that it speaks to the far left. I'm really interested to think from your perspective, is this something that, I don't think people are going to run on this per se, but like, I'm wondering if part of the like easing of the SEC thing could be a little bit of like, they're a little worried about what the political scheme and spectrum could look like.
So it's an interesting thing. And I don't know that I think the SEC is easing. I think narratives, I think sentiment towards the SEC is less favor. Like I think industry is pushing back on the SEC, and you know you're starting to see swirling rumors that like Gary may be asked to step down or maybe leaving, or like who knows. Like there's narratives around it that are negative, but I don't see the SEC easing up
on crypto.
Well, like right, I can't point to.
There's
I can't
no
point
news
to anything
that
they're doing that they're like trying to ease it. What I would say
let me
is,
push back on that real fast. Like,
sure.
Don't you think if a Bitcoin ETF makes it through, that technically is the definition in some ways that they're easing on crypto?
Yeah, if that happens, I would agree.
Okay.
And that's where, to me, I still feel very, you know, it's like, if anybody who listens to this podcast every week, it's just been like tracking Carly's varying moods on the Bitcoin ETF thing, which is, I was at first like, why the hell would they approve this? For exactly this reason. Like it would be such a negation of the vibes they've been putting out. Like, even though if for those of us who are super in the know, we realize that approving a Bitcoin ETF actually really doesn't fly that much in the face of anything that the SEC has been saying, because they've been pretty clear that they don't see Bitcoin as a security. And so Bitcoin's really an exempt from a lot of the stuff that the SEC is going after. But if you're the general public,
yeah, it's a big sign.
They've been doing this very like crypto is bad thing. And if they approve a Bitcoin ETF and suddenly all this capital floods into Bitcoin, that's a mixed message from the SEC if you're the general public who's just like not paying attention to the nuances, which is why I don't think the SEC wants to approve a Bitcoin ETF. I think there is no logical reason to not have a Bitcoin spot ETF at this point. They've already approved Bitcoin futures ETFs. Like, all of their logic for not approving a spot ETF is tenuous at best. The reason we don't have a Bitcoin spot ETF, in my opinion, is because they don't fucking want to do it, because it gives a boon to crypto and they don't want that. So I think, in fact, the only reason we don't have a Bitcoin ETF is literally because they haven't really eased on there. But they may be forced to, because they may just look so stupid at a certain point not approving a spot ETF. And it may just like hurt their credibility with
that's what I'm
players
getting
like
at,
BlackRock so much that they may just have to. I was just listening to Bitcoin just did it. Bankless just did an interview with a Bloomberg guy who's really like tracks, like knows the history of ETFs. Like, clearly this is his ballywick, so to speak. And the way he put it, I believe, was everything that the SEC has said or Gary has been like saying historically would suggest they won't approve this. However, the circumstantial evidence suggests like they will. And
it's BlackRock too, right? It's BlackRock, which
Exactly. I mean, it's the 80-pound gorilla or whatever they say. So make of that what you will. To the other political question you're asking, the Biden administration and the people who are around Biden strike me as folks who would actually very happily signal to even just mainstream Democrats, not just even far left, by being anti-crypto. Like Elizabeth Warren, yes, she's obviously further left, but I don't know. I think a lot of just your like primary voting liberals, you can score points with them, I think, by dunking on crypto. So I don't know that the Biden administration, I don't think that they want to make this issue front and center for them, obviously. Like, nobody's going to make this a big issue in their campaign. Nobody serious is going to make this a big issue in their campaign, as much as maybe we would all like it too.
Absolutely
but like, crypto's a voting issue. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, there's a handful of us who will, who care enough. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's going to be like political pressure to ease from the left for the SEC to ease up.
It's going to be a weird, I mean, I don't want this to turn into politics podcast for sure, but it's going to be a weird election.
Well, I'm about to publish something on RFK, yeah? So
yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's funny. I was going to say, like, one of the things that's going to be so weird is there is all this pressure on Biden to, like, A, step down, right? That's the thing that people are talking about. But then also there's Gavin Newsom waiting in the wings, who's led California, which is, I'm talking about on the left.
On the left.
Which has, like, really done an incredible job, mostly with the tech sector and in a lot of ways kind of bringing all this money in. And you think, okay, that's a younger person who understands the tech world, understands stuff. And on the right, and also RFK Jr., well, that's a separate kind of thing. But on the right, you've got even DeSantis, who obviously has kind of stumbled a little bit as of late, but like will have a much better understanding of all this stuff than the Trump world people will know. Right. And like part of the argument that people are saying is that we've just got all these old people that have been.
Well, we have Suarez too. Suarez is running. Has he announced officially?
I don't know. That's the mayor of Miami, right?
Yes,
that's the Miami mayor? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the mayor of Miami who's like very pro-crypto.
Oh, yeah.
Super and has obviously turned Miami into this super hub. Yeah, he's officially announced, I'm pretty sure. Francis Suarez. Anyway, so yeah, folks, it's a politics podcast now. There's not enough going on in NFTs, so I'm taking it back to my roots. I'll lose all my entire audience. Okay, the other two quick hits I wanted to have up here in our vibes check. We have the negatives, which is Ether, Fatzuki. Just nothing is happening. Just like absolute apathy and boredom is I guess sort of what it feels like. And it's almost that like the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. Like,
that's absolutely what it feels
it's almost
like,
worse. Like I just like I would love for people to be like I feel something about anything. But two things that I just find fun. So folks may have seen on their timeline, there's been some posts around the like 3v3 basketball team that DeGods bought. They bought this a while ago. It's Ice Cube's. I guess is this Ice Cube's league? I don't know all the ins and outs of this.
It's called the Big Three. It's like Ice Cube started it. The idea is basically that you take ex-NBA players or people that are good basketball players and you play 3 versus 3 and you make a whole thing out of it, which is fun. I don't know how crazy it's done, but it's a fun league.
Yeah, and so DeGods had bought a basketball team, and then like Ice Cube was like a DeGod, has been tweeting about DeGods and wearing DeGods swag. Like they just have this like fun relationship. And I just love this because it's the core of why DeGods has succeeded. And I wrote this piece when DeGods first started popping off, or I don't know that it was the first time that it popped off, but when I really feel like it started to enter, like the ETH ecosystem started paying attention to DeGods, which was of course a Solana project. So that was like a thing.
A big deal, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote this piece called The Swagger of DeGods, which is just like, they just have this energy, this like fun energy of like, we're just cool and we do cool shit and we'll buy a basketball team and like Ice Cube. And like, they just have that, it's very broy, but it's also it's the light side of broiness to me, right? Where there's just like, let's just do stupid shit. And so it was fun to see some of the posts coming out about that this week. And I specifically cited that they had bought this basketball team as like one of my points about this energy that they have.
I think, by the way, didn't Moonbirds buy one of these too? Am I crazy?
Somebody else did. I don't know if it was Moonbirds, but you're absolutely right that another project had bought one of these teams.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, Frank does what he does, right? Like he's pretty incredible at that aspect of it. And funny, one of the things that's really interesting, we wrote about this in the top 10. They've got a big drop coming up, season 3. But one of the things that Frank does so well is like, he finds where the narrative is, or he creates a narrative, right? Like if people are feeling like, let's talk about this and let's get Ice Cube to do this, and like that's really fun when it comes to like the club sort of scenario and the kind of feeling of being part of something, and that's a great business for those guys. You know what I mean? Like that makes a lot of sense.
The other positive news that I wanted to shout out, this is actually something, a mint I was just going to bring up, but it's sold out already. So this Station 3 mint, which there's this guy, Bob Lucas, Loukas. He's got a big following. Like he's, I guess been around for a long time in the crypto world. And he has started this, I think it's a combination of things, but this co-working space in the financial district, so sort of in my backyard, which is why this really caught my attention. But he basically sold 1,000 pieces of it's not an open edition, I'm sorry, but like 1,000 edition. How do I phrase that? Anyways, of a Grant Yoon piece of art, and there was 1,000 of them, right? And it was a Grant Yoon picture of the Statue of Liberty. Beautiful. I love Grant Yoon's work. So I was actually bummed. I caught onto this after it had already minted out. And I was like, damn, I would have maybe considered minting this. It was expensive. It was like 0.88. So he sold 1,000 NFTs at 0.88, but it's to fund this grant program for artists and entrepreneurs in the New York area. And then also to give access to like artists and entrepreneurs and things to this co-working space that they have here in New York. So I actually just applied. Like I would love to use the co-working space from time to time. I'm a creator in Web3. Sure. But anyways, really cool. It's just like a positive thing in the space that I wanted to shout out. Initially, it was going to be like, hey, people should go check this out if you want to go mint it. But it's sold out. So now it's more about like, hey, just like something lovely in the space that we should mention in the doldrums of everything else going on.
And again, small access. Interesting ideas, right? Like that's the fun kind of, that's what we've talked about is like access. Like there's a world where if you can get a club that can work. And again, I've been thinking a lot about this lately about like how to find a way to make a subscription model work for something like that, right? Because one of the things you're never going to make work is a club where there's a one-time fee up front and then you never take dues from anybody else, because guess what? The one-time fee can be very expensive, whether it's a country club or Soho House or whatever it is. But there's also a monthly fee, because the monthly fee is like, hey, if I go to this club and I have to, I wanted to use X, Y, and Z, they have to pay for those people that work there.
Yes.
So I've been trying to crack my brain around like what a subscription model looks like. And I think the hardest thing with subscription models, when you think about it, is always about churn, right? And this is a term that they talk about in the Web2 business all the time. Like if you're Netflix or anybody like that, you actually have to pay a certain amount per user to keep them around every month, right? Yep. And ideally, you want that number to be less than
lower than what they're paying in dues. Not ideally. Yes. Functionally, that has to be the case.
Yes,
for the business to sustain long term.
Exactly. So I don't know, but that to me feels like, if you can build a club with even a small number of people, that can be a sustainable business, And I think that it depends on where it is and what it is, but there is a world where that, this thing, if they could expand it to other cities, and if there's a world where like I could go from, I live in New York, but if I'm in LA and I can use a co-working space, like it's almost like a WeWork style thing. That's a really interesting model.
WeWork. I mean, it's we're talking about Frank. It does seem to be like where the Frank's team's head is thinking, though you're adding this recurring revenue model, which to me is a no-brainer. I've joked on this podcast so many times. Like the rest of the business world is obsessed with recurring revenue, and then we were like, NFTs are the new thing, and guess what? It's a one-time payment, and you get lifetime access, and it's like, what?
That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to a story. I don't know how I feel on this yet, which I'm almost afraid to say because I feel like crypto's gonna be mad at me for not knowing how I feel on this. The Arkham intelligence thing.
Yes.
Have you been following this?
Tangentially, it seems...
I'll give the overview.
Yeah, give the overview. I don't think it's great. Let's put it that way to start off.
Yes. And I'm going to say this, and it's going to be like, okay, obviously this isn't great, and obviously this is horrible when you look at it at a high level, and then we'll get into the weeds. So this is an Arkham Intelligence young CEO founder guy, like early 20s, raised $12 million for this business that is essentially a marketplace for intel. So you can go onto this marketplace, you can have information about a wallet, the identity of somebody behind a wallet, and you can go and sell it on this Arkham marketplace, essentially, to a buyer who wants intel on that wallet. And then you have, or you can also go the other way, which is you can have bounties. So I can come and say, I'm looking for intel or information on X, Y, or Z, and I'm willing to pay 2 ETH for it. Like, go forth, on-chain sleuths.
Okay, question first about this. How does anybody confirm that is correct information?
Real.
Yes.
That's Arkham's role. Arkham is saying, I mean, it's part of their role. They're providing this marketplace, but they're going to have this Arkham verified Arkham. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Whatever, however you pronounce
Arkham.
it.
Well, I mean, it's Arkham
Like-
Asylum, like the video game. If it's like it's based, Arkham Asylum was where they kept the Joker in Gotham City. It's so maybe that's what they're using as the naming depicted. I don't know.
Really leaning into that villain.
Yeah, exactly.
That villain narrative. Yeah, so it's like all of it is Varkham verified intel.
Okay.
So there's some. Now, whether or not they do that well, whether or not they have the manpower to do this, like whatever, that is part of the value prop here, is that they will verify the intel.
Okay. My other question is, they raised $12 million. Who have they talked about who's investing in it?
Well, this is part of the whole thing. Palantir is like their lead investor.
Well, now I feel differently in some ways.
The narrative
Jeez.
writes itself, you know? It's like literally, look, I am, of course, on the surface, I'm like, this is not good. Like, nobody asked for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we didn't want this. The spin they're trying to put on it, and you know, the conspiracy theories around this is really just like the government and whatever, but like the spin they're trying to put on it is there are people who have spent a lot of time doing on-chain sleuthing. You know, you think of like in the purest world, it's like
Zach XBT,
like somebody who's got real intel that they can now monetize because they could sell that to a journalist, for example, who wants to buy that information to report on it, or you were saying like people you want to know that this is like an account run by a hedge fund, or this is you know, like this is Beanie has come back as now this other person, and like, you know, there we do need sleuths sleuthing out information, and this is where I almost take the same attitude that I've said around Blur a lot, which is like some things just feel inevitable, like, you know what I mean? Like, if there's a market, there's a market. Now my big thing is, how do you make sure that information isn't being illegally gotten, right? How do you make sure that you're not suddenly incentivizing people to go like break into folks' homes or like go to really extreme dangerous lengths to get information about a wallet or something or whatever, because now they can make money on it. Like, that's what makes me nervous, honestly. Well,
and also a little bit, it makes me nervous about incentivizing giving up information, right? This almost feels like it's like a spy network in a weird way, right? Yeah. Like that. And that's like, listen, I'm sure there are beneficial things coming out of it, you know, when you think about like the idea that terrorists or anybody else could conceivably be hiding behind blockchain payments, which is conceivable. So it can be, you know, Silk Road stuff, conceivably something can happen. I mean, Palantir involvement is sketchy and scary to me. And I don't want to, like, you know, people believe the defense industry is a very strong business, and I kind of understand that. In fact, I saw
it is a strong business.
Yes, I know. Well, this is funny.
They keep getting us into these wars.
Yes, I was going to shout out. There's a great podcast interview I saw with Peter Diamandis, the guy that started SpaceX with Elon Musk, and he interviewed Palmer Luckey. If you don't know, it's the guy that started Oculus. Went through a bunch of other stuff, obviously, and had some real, you know, political stuff go on, but is now the owner and founder of, I don't remember what the name of the company is, but it's a drone plus AI weapons company. And when you watch that video, you're like, wow, this is crazy. And I get why this is a business. None of it makes you feel right, though, right? None of it makes you feel this is a world I want to live in. And I think that's the kind of thing that this feels like to me.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. There's also a whole point of this. There's an important part of the story that we haven't gotten to yet.
Oh, okay. What is that?
And so, well, let me start by just saying, to the point of like, this is not necessarily the world I want to live in, or just like their slogan is de-anonymizing the blockchain.
Oh,
so you
no.
can understand why there are people in the crypto space who don't love them.
Yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
again, I think that they're, look, I sort of respect it. It's like, you just got to lean into what you are. Like, don't, better that than coming out trying to pretend you're some, like, oh my God, frickin' Prometheum, which anybody who follows me on Twitter knows I've been like railing against this whole Prometheum thing. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole before we've finished this Arkham rabbit hole, but like, that's an example of people who are like, we're actually good for cryptocurrency. Right. People just don't see it yet. And it's like, just be honest about what you are, which is trying to make a lot of money. Like, whatever. It's so self-interested.
It's crypto gaslighting.
Totally. Yeah. It's totally. Okay. So I'm like, all right, at least you're acknowledging that you are just trying to like burn the fundamentals upon which this space was built. Okay. But the part of the story that we haven't talked about yet is like, they've just radically fucked up. So part of their whole early business has been this referral program to get people on the platform. They, you know, they, like anything, they have a token or whatever the hell, and they reward you with points. And so you could all these, I think, fairly big people with big accounts tweeting out referral links.
Okay. Oh, yes. I have seen some of this stuff come through. Yeah.
And as part of this referral program and these tweets, basically they'd use like a base 64 system. They took your email address.
Okay.
And then they just like ran it through a simple like encoding thing, a base 64 code, or I don't know the terms, to create your referral link. So you could reverse engineer everyone's referral link and get their
So the emails all basically went public if you talked about your referral link.
So they literally inadvertently this company ended up releasing the email addresses of anybody who shared their referral links.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And then you had people then like getting doxxed. Like then you had somebody who just would match up the Twitter handle, because you had like anonymous Twitter accounts, tweeting out these referral links. So created the spreadsheet just like connecting email addresses with Twitter handles, which gets you to like wallets. Like, and this, it's okay. I watched the documentary about Ashley Madison, the dating site for like having affairs or whatever, and they of course had this big data breach.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I'm making this comparison is because when your entire business is based around, we're going to you're going to be able to sell this information discreetly to another buyer who's going to get it discreetly, and then you have a leak like this, it cuts against the core of what you're supposed to be good at. And it should be a business killer. Now it's not. Ashley Madison still exists, but like it should be a thing that should be the end of your business.
It's the B and C teams, right? Like this is again, it's like bad execution. I don't love this idea, but maybe people thought it was a good idea, but like bad execution. Bad execution will kill every single one of these companies, and it's happening in NFTs, and it's also happening in other crypto businesses. Like it's the same thing we've seen again and again. And by the way, maybe you shouldn't give $10 million to a young person,
24-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe there should be some more watches on that stuff. And I'm sure that there's a lot of crypto Web3 venture funds that have to deploy, but like, let's just keep an ye on this stuff. Like, let's just make
Palantir
sure.
apparently had to deploy. I mean,
exactly.
that is the thing. Zuckerberg ruined it all. Like, he is a unicorn in every sense. Like the fact that person could start a business at 19 or 18, however old he was, continue to run it to this day.
Yeah.
Like somebody that somebody could take a business not just from 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, but like literally the 0 to 100. Like that is so rare.
And let's be honest, he screwed up a ton.
Persists.
Yeah, and Mark Zuckerberg screwed up a ton and got stuff swept under the rug for him in some ways, right? Like even this starting with the Winklevoss stuff, like taking that away from like that. Even that is the beginning stages, but like nowadays it's so much different, I feel like.
Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about. Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. So that actually segues us perfectly to Threads, which I want to talk about.
Yes.
Specifically, I'll kick it off with Mark is just good at copying shit. That is but that's Meta's sweet spot. That is literally what Meta does well. From its founding, Mark is good at taking other people's ideas and then either acquiring them or just implementing them. I mean, again, it's almost the reverse of what we're talking about in this space, right? It's excellent execution.
Wait a second. This is really interesting. Is Meta a specialist in derivatives, and that basically what everything Meta has made has been a derivative of a blue chip project? Now we're
Meta is the Fatzuki of the tech world.
We got our title. Meta is the Fatzuki. That's really funny. I think honestly, you're right. You're right. Every single step along the way. I mean, the thing that I think people talk about Facebook's, or what now is Meta, big success, and the thing that took it over the top was the news feed, right? Which it was a truly like interesting, slightly different thing. Although many people would say like maybe it's copying on what Twitter was at the time.
Well, I'm just laughing. It's like, wow, Meta hasn't innovated since the news feed.
I mean, I think the bigger innovation they were doing was all their stuff around the metaverse, which I think, is a long ways out, and that like has semi-failed. Now you're right. They copied essentially. They bought Instagram.
Well, they bought Instagram and WhatsApp, but they've been incredible acquirers. They've done a fantastic job acquiring.
And then they copied Snapchat stories instead of acquiring them. Like they do have this kind of history. They probably pretty much copied Google ads by using Facebook ads, and that's just a massive, insane business for them. It's crazy. It's a pretty crazy thing. So now we're at Threads.
And the funny thing is, even you say they've done a good job innovating on their metaverse thing. No, that's the first thing they've attempted, seemingly, as far as we know. It's a massive company, but to take a big innovative swing at. And Apple Vision Pro is already expected to be light years ahead not light years ahead of, but like is a much better product than Oculus. So Oculus, which was their big like innovative swing, it's like kind of a mixed thing, honestly. Yeah. So anyway, okay, so that brings us to Threads, which again, I think it was a brilliant move. Now we have no idea what the long tail of this is going to look like, but 100 million users in the first whatever the time frame was, like the fastest adopted app of all time, and you smell blood in the water. You see that Twitter is under siege in some ways. People really aren't liking it. The experience is a lot of people feel like the experience is much worse, et cetera, et cetera. And you've had these other competitors come out. You've got your Blue Skies, your Mastodons, your all these things. But what they don't have is the existing user base of Instagram. Yeah. Which is why Threads just feels like such a Farcaster, Threads just feels like such a more serious competitor, which is obviously what they knew would be the case. Yeah. And so it's very interesting. All right, what's your take?
Okay, I do want to say one thing that I think this is kind of an interesting thing that's happened in the modern day internet media space or technology space, not media. In the last 6 months, we've seen a couple things. OpenAI's ChatGPT and now this hit like 100 million users, and each of them were being like, that's the fastest anything's hit 100 million users. Oh, sorry, do you have something you want to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I've been thinking about that too. The important thing to realize, like, ChatGPT went from 0 to that. Like they didn't have Instagram's user base to pull from. So anyways, continue your point.
So my point is we're in this world now where you can get your thing to many people incredibly fast. Like it is unbelievable how you can get to. So when you say users, I think we need to start redefining the idea of what a user is, because one of my experiences with Threads so far, I got on it, I was there and I saw it. I was there in the first couple of days, I tried it, did some stuff. What it became, though, was it's just another place to go. And I know a lot of people that that have been harassed on Twitter or who hate Twitter because of all these various reasons, love it, and they think it's like the next big thing. But that's also the same people I saw in some ways on Blue Sky saying the same thing back then. I think what's going to be interesting is where is Threads at 3 months from now? Because the question is, how much of this is an early adopter shot at what this is, seeing what it feels like? I think that 100 million number now gets rallied around, and then it becomes like, who uses it? Because you say 100 million users, that's great, but like in a social network world, if you have zombie users, which are people that have accounts but don't use it, there's zero value there, right? So I think my big question is, who's going to be around in 3 months still on it?
So it's funny because you're getting at something that Mario Narfall, everyone's I guess favorite villain, is tweeted about, and he's obviously a huge Elon fan, and he's fully ensconced in that world of those guys.
He's also put his whole business model on Twitter Spaces. So
on Twitter, right? So he's like got a big incentive. His bags are speaking when he's defending Twitter. But he was tweeting out something. I mean, he was making the case, and this is where it's like, all right, that's your bags talking, but making the case for why this will actually help Twitter, because people will go on Threads, realize they like a product like this, and then come to Twitter, whatever. Who knows if that will or will not happen. But he cited some stats, apparently from Linda Yaccarino, the new Twitter CEO, and from Elon, which was that last week, Twitter had its like highest user day ever.
Well, I will say, you know why? It's because Elon and Zuck have spun this thing up, and Elon has leaned into this idea. And Elon literally tweeted something out about dick size, which I think is like one of the craziest things I've ever seen any CEO tweet before. And I was thinking about Linda Yaccarino reading that. I was just like, Just imagine this like CEO who I know who comes from NBC, is a very professional woman, very smart, reading that tweet and just being like, what did I get myself into? Now, granted.
But she knew.
Sure. No, she knew. But also like that's, listen, Elon's doing Elon. He's playing the game and he wants that stat. He wants like the big thing and he knows he's the villain, right? Like, and he knows right now he's playing that and he's leaning into that. The thing I do think that has them worried a little bit is there is this divide. I know that this sounds, I'll spin this back to NFTs in a second. There's this big divide between Twitter and now Threads. And what Twitter had moved towards is this like kind of open platform where you could say anything, freedom of speech, number one. But they had kind of moved away from like helping people deal with harassment and helping people deal with like bad actors, basically. And by removing the check marks and making everybody pay for the check mark, giving people check marks that maybe shouldn't have check marks, all that stuff is kind of fed into that. I do think there's a world going forward where social networks that don't kind of clean up their street, when you walk down the street, they don't clean up their street, are going to be in trouble. And I don't mean this as I believe in freedom of speech. Like I'm definitely like believe people should be able to say what they want to say. But if your street, if you can get mugged on the street that you live in, or if somebody's going to yell at you, there's a way less chance you're going to walk down that street. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Totally. Elon agrees with that, though. This is where I feel like what Elon's position has been kind of twisted by a lot of people who don't like him, and which, again, like there's stuff he's tweeted that I find so abhorrent. Like he has just disappointed me so much because I actually have always really liked Elon, and I think he's incredibly disappointing and toxic at this point in a lot of ways. But I will say, like, his whole thing has always been like, you don't have the right to be amplified. Like he has said that before. Like
sure.
But
I don't feel like he's backed it up, though.
Correct.
Really?
And that's the thing, is that there's still a bot problem. He hasn't actually fixed this yet. And there is this distance between, I feel like, the vision he wanted, which is different than the vision that I think the left has said he wanted, and then what he's actually executed so far. I'm willing to give it years because I think any product deserves a long time. This is what I was going to say, though. So this was not Mario Narfal's thing. So I guess Linda Yaccarino announced that last week we had our largest usage day since February. Okay, so since February, that's not of all time. And then Elon replied that cumulative user seconds per day of phone screen time.
Well, that's a weird stat.
May hit an all-time record this week. So what I was trying to get at, here's what I was trying to tie at. I know, I don't, because I'm like,
I'm trying to make
even on Twitter.
CUS. I'm trying to think, is he doing
PDPSCT? There's no doing that. There's no acronizing this. The point that Mario was making, whether or not I think the data he pulled here actually makes his point or not, is that app downloads, the point that I agree with, I should say this, app downloads, and this is the point you were making. All right, I'm going to get to this point in a second before I instead of continuing, just caveat it. App downloads or like first week reported users is not really the important metric.
Yes.
The important metric is daily, monthly, yearly users.
Active
like how many people are active users, right?
Yep.
MAU, DAO, that kind of stuff, DAU. And we just don't know where that falls yet. You know, it's funny for me because my Twitter world and my Instagram world are totally different worlds.
Me too.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering is like, am I unique in that, or is that true for a lot of people? That's why I haven't loved Threads. Is I'm like, I don't need to read the tweets of the Instagram people I follow. Like there's some overlap, and then also for somebody like me, like the people who follow me on Instagram, like the people who follow me on Twitter don't follow me on Instagram. So it's just a different world.
Well, that's why I'm going to spin this back to NFTs, because I think there's an interesting point here, which is obviously Twitter has been vital in the growth of NFTs. It's been used in a lot of ways in NFTs. Like PFPs have become PFPs mostly because of views on Twitter. You've seen giant handles get built by anonymous figures on Twitter. I think Instagram social graph is entirely different, right? Instagram social graph is not based on, knowledge, what you're talking about, all this other stuff. It's really based on visuals first, right? And I think that
are you hot?
Are you hot? Number one. Is your food good? Number two. Are you a celebrity?
Are you taking very expensive vacations?
Yes. But also, are you a celebrity or influencer? Yes. And I think this is what you see at the beginning of Threads. And I think one thing that a lot of NFT users are seeing who have swapped over. I've seen a couple of my friends swap over with their PFPs, and they're getting, shit on because they're like, oh, NFT, blah, blah, blah. that feeling that we all kind of went through and built our own kind of community on Twitter. And I when I first started, I started a completely separate Twitter handle, called Funky Dunk, which we've talked about, to be avoid of that mostly. And I raised that into my own thing, getting to know those people as well as holding my normal Twitter handle. All of that has to happen again now, and it's with an audience that doesn't have the knowledge base or the understanding. And I think that's where you run the risk of really having a hard time onboarding those people, because it goes back to like, we've all created communities in different places now. To port a community entirely from one thing to another is remarkably hard, right? Remarkably hard.
Which gets us back to why we need Web3. And I will say what is interesting about the Instagram Mastodon connection, that you can take your followers from Threads to Mastodon, is very cool. And I will say, like, Adam Mosseri, the CEO of Instagram, has spoken a lot about like portable audiences, and that's why he was favorable towards NFTs. Go ahead. I
know I have a new this is another thing I've seen floating around, which I think is a really important thing. And I think the All In guys mentioned some version of this, because I saw a clip with Cal Canis talking about it, but I believe it's something that's been happening for a while. Meta is weirdly flip-flopping now to a world where instead of being a more closed company, they're becoming a more open company. And why they're doing that is because they're getting defensive. And in AI, they are leading the charge in the open source model release thing. They're going to release their next big model open source. And this also feels like a leaning into that, because they're kind of back on their heels, and they know when you're back on your heels, you have to do things that are a little bit more open to people and kind of change the narrative.
And consumer-centric.
Yes. And by the way, Zuckerberg is smart at it. He knows, right? Like, it's clear.
Also, Elon Musk was the best thing to happen to Zuckerberg, because Zuckerberg was the villain until Elon just became so outrageous that all these people tech reporters who had hated Elon, who had hated Zuck, are like, he seems like he's a really professional he's such a professional young man,
He's in great shape now. Look at him play MMA and everything. Yeah.
It's just been it's been the best for his image. Okay, last two news items before we wrap. First, this Made by Apes announcement. I'll put it with a lowercase a, because we don't really know exactly what this is yet. I mean, it's clear directionally what it is, which is that the Apes account tweeted out this Made by Apes cool video, and then Garga provided a little bit of information, basically just saying that up to this point it's been hard. There's a lot of people who wants to support the ape ecosystem or have built businesses off of an ape, and there hasn't been one clear way to find those businesses or to I don't know, interact with those businesses, whatever the case is. So it sounds like it's going to be some level of like discoverability around ape-led businesses.
I mean, cool. I will say one thing I think about apes, and I think this is maybe me more. By the way, I don't want to discount this. This is a very cool thing. Part of me thinks like a company that had a $4 billion valuation, I sometimes feel like they don't operate at that level. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but like, you think about large corporations. We just talked about Facebook, or we talked about all these other companies. And like, sometimes it feels like they're still operating as like kind of a Etsy business in a weird way. And I think partially that, I think that's it's cool in some ways, right? Partially that's about your whatever, we talked about 50,000 holders, but really you're talking about 10,000 ape holders or less, and then 20,000 mutant holders, who are really the kind of core of the ape world. Like, you're trying to kind of make those people feel like they are part of something, which again, an important thing, but maybe that's just a dichotomy of like how you have to appeal to different aspects of people that own NFTs.
The whole point of Web3 is we do want our businesses to feel closer to us. We don't want them to feel like these
of course. Yes, absolutely.
Castles and these palaces. And I don't know if there is a way to do that without feeling a little Etsy-ish, right? That you want people want them to feel mom and pop-ish, because that's what makes them feel connected to it, and like there's an accessibility there. I don't know. You made the joke. You were like, 2021 called, it wants its business model back or whatever. Which it's funny because I think you're kind of right about that. I was covering this a lot in early 2022, or probably around the time the Moonbird CC0 announcement came out, when people were really grappling with IP rights and what
the value of your NFT was and all that stuff.
Correct. Like, what was the value of owning the IP? And it's interesting, actually, like Feature, our friend John Rogers is an advisor for Feature. They had licensed tech that they had made, and I've had Feature on the podcast, to Coinbase, who used it to cast apes in the trilogy that Coinbase was going to make. They never ended up releasing.
Oh,
the whole
that's
thing,
right. There was only one of them.
Remember that whole thing? They released one, and then they got so much shit that they were like, this probably isn't the right use of money. They just scrapped the whole thing. But they paid like $10,000, I think, or something like that per ape that starred in there that they cast for this trilogy, and that was a whole. That was a whole thing. It's still a thing, right? But there was a period of time in which I was covering that a lot, like this idea that suddenly these NFTs that you were going to own were going to become stars in their own right, that you would license them out and they would star in commercials or this and that. And I still think there's a business there. I mean, as with anything, like how big is that business? The number of people who become stars in real life is very small, right? But it's interesting. But so to that point, like this has been something that's been. This isn't new.
It's not new. It's not new. Yeah. I mean, this is cool. Right. I mean, I still think in some ways there's a real business around, like if you're a microbrewer and you want to use your ape and that's a good branding for you and you believe that you can sell more beer because of the ape, like great. I think that's awesome. Like you should be able to do that and build those.
Leverage that network. It should be able to be found.
Exactly.
I mean, what'll be interesting to me is like, so the Garga's exact tweet was, there hasn't been an easy on-chain way to verify these items or an official directory for everything apes and mutants are making. So
smart. It's really smart. I mean,
I'm totally with you. I think it's a positive thing. It's a cool thing. I saw a thread that was like really trying to hype this up of like, this is even a bigger deal than you realize because like you can get funding for your idea now through ApeDAO. And now there's going to be this directory. Like they're building this massive entrepreneur network. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Kind of like, I get like, they're building an entrepreneur network. I don't know that it's like gonna blow anybody's face off. My biggest question is who's going to this directory?
Well, this is what I think gets back to we talked about with Apes, is that like the entire thesis and part of Apes was based on the idea that these are the social signaling thing that people are going to think they're cool, that they're selling t-shirts to them at Hot Topic. I'm not sure that is the case anymore. Not to burst the Apes bubble. If that's not the case anymore, and to your point, who's going to go to this directory? In the world where that is the case, everybody will go to the directory because they'd be like, oh, I want to get a way to use an ape to do X, Y, and Z, or I want to see an ape to do this. Like,
I don't know that I think that's true.
You don't think so?
I think ape, okay, I think that who's going to go to the directory is ape holders, right? Ape holders who want to maintain the value of the ape network, to the extent that we can signal with our dollars, want to go to this directory to support other apes.
Sure.
But you think in a world, even in a world where apes are still the coolest thing in the world and you can socially signal and Justin Bieber still owns his and whatever, like random people are going to the directory to specifically buy ape business things?
Wait,
to me, it's always just the ape network.
Well, I think the promise of that is if it's only apes, then you're kind of screwed, right? Because the whole promise with go back to the microbrew example, say I'm a normal consumer, but I'm a distributor. Like I'm Kit Kodak, who works in liquor, our friend who worked on the OPJ NFT. And I know the liquor business, but I'm not a person. If I go to that directory because I want to find out who owns like Ape Ale, do you know what I mean? Because I think Ape Ale is a really good beer and it did X, Y, and Z. That's really valuable to that particular ape, the person that owned Ape Ale. And then you find some sort of distribution deal out of that. My thing is like those sorts of people will not necessarily be coming to the ape directory because I don't know if the demand for the person outside of the ape world will want that stuff. I do think, though, that was the promise of this, right? The promise of this originally was my ape, the one with the bra on the head or whatever it is, the weirdest one, that ape's going to become the star and everybody's going to want to use my ape in their smart water commercial. Yeah, exactly.
I guess I see it more as it's very hard to go from 0 to 1 in a business or whatever. And to create that initial network.
Yes.
And I think that the idea is that this enables you to bootstrap a network faster than you might be able to otherwise because you have this built-in audience of holders who are incentivized to help buy.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
And I think that premise was stronger when more people cared about apes and NFTs. I think that premise still exists, right? And that's why I think you and I, we're being cynical about this, but I don't like this is good, like it's a lovely, awesome thing to do.
Absolutely.
I just also it's not I don't want to necessarily like overblow what it is either. Yeah. Okay. Last piece of news to close on here today as we record this, which is Thursday, July 13th, the Coinbase and the SEC have a court date set. It's expected to be a very like administrative meeting. This is not like a trial is being set by any means. Apparently it is Coinbase is going to try and get a judge to dismiss the SEC's suit out of hand, would be one outcome that they're hoping for. That's probably unrealistic, but basically saying like, hey, you know, these aren't securities. We'll make this case to you right now as to why none of these things are securities. None of these things pass the Howey test or whatever. And so dismiss this whole motion because we're clearly not selling unregistered securities. I think it's pretty unlikely that the judge determines that at this stage. But it's interesting. It's like this. It's just something to track as this whole thing moves forward.
I mean, listen, I think that the sooner we get answers on all this stuff, the better we're going to be. I think it's hard for somebody who has a life and has other things they do, whether it's make a media company or do all this other stuff, to kind of track exactly what's happening in this world, because there's so many like tidbits of news that get spun up into bigger things. And what you just want is like, what are the actual news? And we have today's a thing, right? Like we're starting this thing, and like what will be great is just to get some sort of clarity. And I've mentioned this on the show before. I have friends of mine who are in the TradFi business that I spend time with in this space, who know the space really well. And in their mind, they want all of it to be clear, but not all of it, but like they want the thing to come down that just allows all the mainstream money buckets to come into the space, because that will flush the things that come out. I don't necessarily want that, but I think that the key is we've all just been waiting for some sort of answer on this stuff forever. That, like, personally, I just get kind of like sick of the drip of it all.
The in-between,
yes.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, this is still drip. And actually, I'm looking here. It sounds like the specific... Instead of this, I'm reading a quote here. Instead of filing a motion to dismiss, Coinbase will seek dismissal because, quote, the subject matter falls outside the SEC's authority. So apparently that's the initial tack that Coinbase is taking here as part of this. Anyway, I like some of this court stuff, and I don't like the drip either. I would like answers, but I enjoy that I have something in the meantime.
Oh, of course. You know? I mean, at least it's something to talk about. I think a lot of people in this space are aware of it. I think that, like, listen, we're all setting up what the answers are going to be for the next, like, 5 to 10 years of crypto right now, right? Or maybe longer. Who knows? Until quantum computing blows all of our encryption out the window. But I think that, like, this stuff getting settled really now, in this kind of like semi-dark time that we've been through, is great, because then going forward, we all can have an understanding of like what it's going to look like and how the world economy is going to adopt or not adopt this space. And I think there's a lot of clarity, and as soon as the clarity comes, it'll be, you know, enlightening to see what the responses are. Because I think that's the other side, is like, okay, there's never going to be like, I feel like we all want to like a line drawn in the sand and say like crypto's okay or crypto's not okay. Not going to be that either. It's more of like how the mainstream, like kind of economic world and consumer world respond to the answer that we get over time. That's going to be the kind of like thing to watch, and it's just going to take a while.
Yep. Agreed. All right, folks, that's our episode. Enjoy your weekend. Hopefully I'll see y'all on the 25th in Los Angeles, and if not, I'll see you in the future, hopefully. That's an ending to this, right? That's right.
she's gonna be back next week. Don't worry.
That's a way to say. That's a way to close this episode. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.